love and hate two words we pretend to understand, though both remain vast, unknowable storms within the soul. We speak of them as opposites, as light and dark, as angel and demon. Yet the truth, when stripped of its sentimental disguise, is more unnerving. They are born from the same womb, the will that desires, demands, and never rests. Love is not the miracle we imagine. It is the fever of a creature that cannot bear its own loneliness. It begins not in heaven, but in hunger. A hunger so ancient, so instinctual, that even reason kneels before it. When we fall in love, we do not fall toward another. We fall into the oldest deception nature ever whispered. The poets called it destiny. The philosophers called it union. The biologists, reproduction. But the truth lies deeper, colder, and more tragic. Love is the will to live, wearing a mask of tenderness. It is the same force that makes the tiger devour, the vine strangle, the flame consume oxygen until it dies. The lover, like all living things, is but a slave to this, will a servant to life's relentless command. Multiply, continue, endure. And yet, we dress this compulsion in poetry. We crown it with halos and songs. We declare it divine. But what we call falling in love is nothing more than the moment when the will tricks the intellect. It blinds us long enough to ensure its continuation. Every "I can't live without you" is a confession of this subjugation, the will using words to mask its hunger. The first glance, the trembling hand, the pulse that races, we think these are signs of beauty awakening within us, but they are the machinery of the species moving through us. We are not participants, but conduits. The will breathes through our veins, indifferent to our suffering, careless of our reason. It only wants to exist again, and for that, it makes us call its fever love. Oh, one. This is why love feels like madness. Because it is. It is a temporary insanity, one that suspends clarity and enthrones delusion. The lover kneels before an image, not a person. The beloved is idealized, sanctified, purified of all imperfection. We see not who they are, but what our hunger needs them to be. We imagine in them salvation from loneliness, from meaninglessness, from the slow corrosion of our days. We want them to be our mirror, our purpose, our proof that existence is not in vain. But in this idealization lies the seed of future hatred. For the more divine we make them, the more human they will seem when the illusion fades. No one falls out of love they awaken. When the dream collapses, when the halo burns away and the beloved becomes a mere mortal, the soul rebels. It feels deceived. It blames the other for the disillusionment that was always its own. The heart whispers, "You changed," when in truth, it was our vision that did. This is the first fracture, the beginning of transformation. Love dies not because it was betrayed, but because it fulfilled its biological purpose. The will is sated, and with that satisfaction comes the inevitable boredom of the intellect. The spell is broken. The dreamer sees the dream for what it was, a lie told by the body. And here, in the silence after desire, something darker begins to breathe. Resentment. The lover, now stripped of illusion, feels the humiliation of their own blindness. What they once adored now irritates. What once seemed divine now seems trivial, even grotesque. Every habit of the beloved, once endearing, becomes unbearable. The same smile that once lit the world now provokes contempt. Why? Because we cannot forgive them for ceasing to be the dream we created. Love and hate are not enemies, they are consecutive moods of the same enslavement. The will that once adored now condemns. It loved because it believed the object could end its suffering. It hates because it discovers it cannot. In truth, love was never about the other. It was about our own longing to dissolve the unbearable solitude of being. The beloved was a mirror, reflecting back an illusion of completeness. But mirrors are cruel. They always crack. And when they do, we see not our beloved's betrayal, but our own dependence. To love is to hand another the power to wound. To idealize is to sign a silent contract with disappointment. And when that disappointment arrives, as it always must, hatred becomes the soul's defense, its desperate act of preservation. Hatred is the second act of love, born when affection can no longer lie to itself. It is easier to despise than to accept that we were deceived. It is easier to curse the other than to face the truth that what we called love was only the will's intoxication. Hate gives us back the illusion of control. If I can hate you, the heart whispers, then I am no longer your slave. But this, too, is another illusion. For hatred is still attachment inverted, distorted, but unbroken. It is love that cannot die, because the will cannot let go. The greatest torment of the human condition is this. We are condemned to oscillate between craving and contempt, desire and disgust, attraction and aversion. The same fire that warms us burns us. The same touch that heals us wounds us. Love promises meaning but delivers dependence. And when dependence collapses, the debris rearranges itself into hostility. Listen carefully. Every hatred carries the ghost of love. The more intense the affection once was, the more violent its decay. Indifference is not the opposite of love. Indifference is peace. Hatred is love's corpse refusing to rot. You may think your hatred is righteous, justified, even moral. But look deeper. Beneath the anger is pain. Beneath the pain is longing. And beneath that longing, the same ancient will that once made you whisper, I need you. How quickly the words change. I need you. I hate you. Between them lies the same dependency, merely stripped of illusion. And yet, the world celebrates this madness. We are taught to worship love, to call it divine, sacred, redemptive. We build entire civilizations around its mythology. We write novels, songs, films, all proclaiming that love is the answer. But to what question? Love is not the answer. It is the most beautiful form of the question itself. Why do we suffer? Every declaration of love is an admission of lack. Every I adore you contains a hidden I am empty. And when that emptiness is not filled, affection turns into accusation. You see, love is not destroyed by betrayal, neglect, or time. It is destroyed by clarity. To see clearly is to end the spell. To see the beloved as they are ordinary, fragile, finite, is to face the unbearable truth that what we loved was never them, but our projection of salvation upon them. And when that projection collapses, the fall feels catastrophic. The lover stands among the ruins of their own delusion and calls it heartbreak. But heartbreak is only the ego mourning its lost fantasy. It is not the person we grieve, it is the illusion of transcendence that once animated us. The tragedy is not that love ends, but that it ever began as a lie. Nature laughs at our pain. For her, the purpose is fulfilled. The will has continued itself through us. The rest, the poems, the tears, the promises are irrelevant. The cosmos remains indifferent to our romance. And yet we, foolish creatures that we are, call this cosmic trick fate. We are enchanted, then broken, then bitter. We curse love for its cruelty, never realizing we were never its masters, only its instruments. To love, then, is to be used by life itself. To hate is to realize it too late. The line between them is thin, almost invisible, drawn not in the heart, but in the will. And so the descent continues from illusion to clarity, from rapture to resentment. Soon we will reach the deeper chambers, the psychology of turning, the slow rot of dependency, the cultural machinery that sustains the illusion of romance. But first, the silence, the pause where passion dies and the intellect awakens, trembling before the wreckage. Love was the dream, hate is the awakening. And the truth, the terrible, liberating truth, is that both were always the same dreamer. When love collapses, the mind does not find peace, it finds reflection. The heart becomes a mirror, and in it we glimpse the twisted image of our own dependence. What we once worshipped as beauty now looks back at us as mockery. The beloved's face, once a promise, becomes a reminder of how deeply we mistook longing for truth. This is the moment most cannot endure, the point where tenderness curdles into contempt. For what do we truly hate in those we once adored? Not their flaws, for those were always there. Not their betrayal, for even that is only the failure of an expectation. We hate the reflection of our own blindness. The beloved becomes the scapegoat for our disillusionment. Their presence recalls the foolishness we would rather forget. Every encounter becomes an accusation, every silence a mirror. In their eyes, we see the ghost of the dream that deceived us, and so we turn away, not from them, but from the humiliation of having once believed. Hate, then, is not the opposite of love, but its aftermath, the recoil of the soul from its own exposure. It is the emotional scar left by truth. Consider how swiftly the tone changes. The words once whispered in reverence become weapons. "I love you" transforms into "you never loved me." Every gesture that once symbolized devotion is reread as manipulation. Every memory becomes corrupted, reinterpreted through bitterness. The past itself is rewritten to justify the present. Such is the mind's self-defense against awakening. It must make the pain moral. It must declare, "I was wronged." To admit instead, "I was deluded," would require a strength few possess. For delusion wounds pride more deeply than betrayal wounds the heart. We cling to hatred as the last illusion that we were innocent. But no one is innocent in love. Love is mutual hypnosis. Each partner intoxicated by the reflection of their own fantasy, each mistaking the other's body for eternity. This is why every love affair carries within it the seeds of its own destruction. It begins with blindness, and blindness cannot last. Sooner or later, the dream collapses under the weight of reality. The beloved's humanity intrudes their imperfections, their ordinariness, their fatigue. The enchantment falters, and the lover, once elated, now feels trapped in a cage of their own creation. To have loved deeply is to have believed desperately, and belief, when it breaks, leaves not emptiness but hostility. We do not hate the beloved for who they are, but for who they are, not for failing to be the fantasy that justified our surrender. This is why lovers become enemies faster than strangers, because between them lies the memory of illusion. Every insult in hatred echoes an earlier whisper of devotion. Every accusation is a shadow cast by a former promise. And yet, beneath the hostility, a deeper current flows. The will still clings. It cannot release the object, even as it condemns it. It must keep the connection alive, even through rage. For indifference, true indifference, is death to the will. Thus, love and hate sustain each other, oscillating like a pendulum between attachment and aversion. The lover who despises cannot let go. The hater who rages still remembers. They are two sides of the same dependency, one burning with desire, the other with resentment, both unable to rest. Look closely at your hatred. Beneath its coldness burns the same flame. The will still wants. It wants to undo what cannot be undone, to rewrite the story where passion could have remained pure. But purity is incompatible with human will. For will corrupts everything it touches, turning affection into need, need into demand, demand into disappointment. No one escapes this. Even the most enlightened among us feel the sting of desire's decay. We are creatures of contradiction, longing for union, yet terrified of losing ourselves within it. This is the hidden engine of all romantic tragedy. We seek to possess what cannot belong to us, and when we fail, we destroy it. We call it heartbreak. But in truth, it is awakening brutal, irreversible, and necessary. The modern world, however, cannot bear such honesty. It sells us dreams of perpetual passion, of eternal romance, of the one who will complete us. Society has become a machine for the production of delusion. From childhood, we are trained to worship love as salvation. Fairy tales tell us that happiness begins when two become one. Films, songs, advertisements all repeat the same sacred lie. That love is the cure for loneliness. That to be loved is to be whole. But the truth is otherwise. Love does not heal loneliness, it merely conceals it. For a time, we forget the void, but only by projecting it onto another. When that projection collapses, the void returns, now deeper, because we have tasted false unity. The culture of romance thrives on this oscillation between illusion and despair. It must keep us believing that the next love, the next person, the next promise will finally deliver what the last one could not. And so we continue buying flowers, swiping profiles, exchanging vows, not out of wisdom but out of fear. Modern love has become a ritual of distraction. We no longer seek partners, we seek anesthetics. We no longer confess affection, we negotiate relevance. In the digital bazaar of affection, love has become a commodity. We measure it in notifications, validate it through mirrors of glass and code. The beloved is not cherished. They are displayed, curated, consumed. And when the illusion fractures, we discard them like outdated technology. It didn't work out, we say, as if affection were a failed app, as if human souls were prototypes. The cruelty of modern love is not its failure, but its speed. We rush through intimacy as though depth were a threat. We speak of moving on as though forgetting were triumph. But forgetfulness is only ignorance disguised as healing. The wound does not close, it merely hides. And so hatred thrives not in violence, but in indifference. The new cruelty is apathy, the erasure of significance. The heart now kills not with rage, but with silence. Society applauds this. Be strong, it says. Don't care. But strength without understanding is only numbness. And numbness is the soul's slow decay. In truth, the opposite of suffering is not peace, it is emptiness. A barren plain where the will still exists, but has forgotten what it desired. This, too, is a kind of hell. And yet, everywhere, culture continues to sanctify the cycle. The songs promise eternal passion. The films end before reality intrudes. Social media floods the mind with curated joy, the illusion that others have found what we have lost. But no one has found it. There is nothing to find. Love, in its modern form, is an echo chamber of longing, a repetition of the same hunger in new costumes. Each relationship becomes a rerun of the same tragedy. Two beings trying to escape their own solitude by merging their illusions. And still, we call it romance. We are a civilization addicted to the idea that suffering can be redeemed through union, that somewhere, someone can silence the ache. But the ache is not a flaw, it is existence itself. To live is to lack. To desire is to suffer. To love is to mistake that suffering for meaning. The culture of optimism cannot accept this. It demands solutions, not understanding. It turns even philosophy into therapy, even heartbreak into growth. But to grow from illusion is not to heal, it is to die to one's former self. Most resist this death. They seek new illusions, softer lies. They tell themselves they have learned to love better, as if the problem were technique. But love cannot be improved. It can only be seen through. The wisdom of despair is to recognize the futility without bitterness, to see that the very structure of desire guarantees dissatisfaction. The will's hunger can be disguised, redirected, spiritualized, but never eradicated. To love is to be ensnared. To hate is to try and gnaw one's way free. Both are the same captivity, viewed from different corners of the cell. The modern world calls this romantic experience. Schopenhauer called it bondage. And yet, beneath all this cynicism, there remains something tragic, even beautiful. For in our delusion, we reveal the depth of our longing, the soul's impossible wish to transcend itself. The will, blind and brutal though it is, still dreams of eternity. This is the paradox. The same force that imprisons us also makes art, music, poetry. The same hunger that corrupts love creates the most haunting beauty. It is the will's one redeeming feature that its madness occasionally gives rise to meaning. But meaning is not truth. Meaning is the mirage that keeps the will in motion. If we truly saw through it completely, without flinching, we would cease to desire and perhaps cease to live. That is the quiet terror at the heart of wisdom. To see too clearly is to question whether life itself is worth the clarity. And yet, clarity is the only dignity left to the conscious being. To love blindly is human. To suffer because of it is inevitable. But to understand why that is liberation, not the joyful kind, not the blissful illusion of redemption, but the dark, sober peace of knowing the game, of seeing the strings that move the puppets. That peace does not laugh, nor does it weep. It simply watches. So let the illusion crumble. Let the myths of love and hate collapse into their single essence, the will that drives us all. See the beloved not as angel or demon, but as fellow sufferer, fellow captive. In that vision, hatred dissolves, not into affection, but into understanding. And understanding, though it cannot save us, can silence the noise. When love dies, it rarely disappears. It mutates. What was once devotion becomes obsession. What was once tenderness becomes surveillance. The mind that once adored begins to calculate. The lover studies the ruins, rewrites the history, reinterprets every memory in search of an explanation that will ease the humiliation of having believed. The heart becomes both detective and executioner, determined to make sense of its suffering. But suffering has no sense, it only has necessity. In every broken attachment, there is a moment when the soul stands naked before itself. The mind whispers, "How could I have been so blind?" But blindness was the condition of love itself. To see clearly would have been to never love at all. The intellect, now awakened, looks upon the wreckage and calls it betrayal. But it is only the will returning to its natural state of dissatisfaction. What was called happiness was merely the temporary anesthetic of desire. When the anesthetic wears off, pain returns sharper, cleaner, unmediated. And because the will cannot admit that its own nature caused the wound, it projects the blame outward. Thus, hatred is born. Hatred is pain's disguise, the soul pretending that its suffering has an external cause. The beloved becomes the effigy upon which we burn our shame. Every accusation is an attempt to shift the unbearable truth that the suffering began within us, long before the other ever arrived. Dependency, that is the real culprit. We mistake need for intimacy, possession for union. To love, in the ordinary sense, is to bind one's peace to another's mood. The lover's smile becomes oxygen, their indifference a suffocation. It is not devotion, but slavery. And every slave, when the chains are exposed, learns to hate the master. The tragedy is that the master never existed, only our need did. The modern vocabulary calls it attachment, but attachment is too soft a word. It is hunger, fear, and ego woven into one. The beloved becomes an extension of our self-image. Their presence confirms our worth. Their withdrawal negates it. The mind fuses I and you into one illusion, and when that illusion cracks, the I feels amputated. What we call heartbreak is the ego mourning its lost limb. Notice how hatred often carries traces of tenderness. We say, "I don't care anymore," yet we replay the same moments in endless repetition. We claim to despise them, yet we know their habits by heart. Hate keeps the connection alive, not in warmth, but in fire. The will would rather burn than vanish. It feeds on the ashes of what it once adored. This is why people stalk, insult, or obsess after love's end, not because they despise, but because they cannot release. Indifference is unbearable to the will. Even agony feels preferable to absence. The worst pain is not losing the beloved, but losing the meaning that their existence once gave us. Memory deepens the wound. The mind, enslaved to its own recollections, weaponizes nostalgia. Every gentle moment becomes a poisoned relic. "We were happy once," it whispers, but happiness, like perfume, fades when exposed to the air of analysis. We do not remember them as they were. We remember them as we needed them to be. The past becomes an opium dream, sweet, fatal, and unreal. Jealousy is the will's last convulsion. It is not the fear that they love another. It is the terror that we no longer exist in their world. We mistake this for moral outrage, but it is metaphysical panic. To the will, being forgotten feels like annihilation. So jealousy rages, not to reclaim the person, but to reclaim the sense of significance that their absence stole. When hatred reaches its peak, it begins to turn inward. The mind grows weary of its own noise. The rage exhausts itself. Every argument, every memory, every imagined revenge becomes tedious. The will, like a beast that has run in circles too long, begins to stumble. It realizes that all this fury has changed nothing. The beloved still exists, indifferent, elsewhere. The universe remains silent. And in that silence, a strange clarity appears. For the first time, one sees that love and hate were not moral experiences, but mechanical ones. They were movements of the same imprisoned force, the will striving towards satisfaction and recoiling from disappointment. The faces, the stories, the emotions were only masks. Behind them, the same pulse beat blind, endless, cruel. At this point, a new kind of seeing begins. It is not warm, but it is free. It is the vision that comes when illusion has spent itself. The lover no longer wants the beloved back, nor do they wish them harm. They simply see through the entire theater, the longing, the drama, the ecstasy, the grief, and recognize it for what it always was, the will's performance before the mirror of consciousness. To see this is to stand outside the play, if only for a moment. The curtain drops, and behind it, nothing remains but silence, the silence of reality, indifferent and vast. It is not comforting, but it is true, and truth, even when it wounds, cleanses. This is the first release, to no longer blame, to no longer beg, to simply see. In that stillness, compassion flickers, not the sentimental compassion of romance, but a deeper recognition. You look at the one you once loved and see not the angel or the enemy, but another prisoner of the same will. Their actions, like yours, were driven by forces neither understood. They, too, were deceived by the same longing for completeness. When this insight deepens, something dissolves. The hatred loses its grip. The need to justify or condemn fades. The beloved becomes human again, finite, flawed, ephemeral, and so do you. The grand narrative of us collapses into the small truth of two beings who suffered under the same spell. From this humility arises a quiet mercy. Not forgiveness in the moral sense, but understanding. Forgiveness implies superiority. Understanding implies equality. You see that no one was to blame, because everyone was blind. The world, however, calls this detachment cold. It prefers drama to clarity, passion to peace. It cannot comprehend a love without possession, a care without demand. But such love is the only one that survives disillusionment. To love without wanting that is the philosopher's love. It is no longer intoxication, but perception. It seeks nothing, demands nothing, clings to nothing. It sees beauty and lets it pass, as one watches sunlight move across a wall. This is not joy, but serenity, the quiet relief of no longer chasing what cannot be kept. Many fear this state, mistaking it for numbness, but numbness is the refusal to feel. Serenity is the refusal to suffer unnecessarily. It does not erase affection, it cleanses it of illusion. What remains is a gentle sadness, the kind that accompanies understanding. For when the veil lifts, the world appears both beautiful and tragic. Every face, every story, every heartbeat becomes a brief flicker of the will's endless striving. You see, lovers embrace and know that beneath their laughter lies the same machinery, the same eventual sorrow, and yet you no longer despise it. You simply watch the way one watches rain fall on graves and flowers alike. To reach this point is to begin freedom, though freedom is a dangerous word. It does not mean escape, it means awareness. You still desire, but you know the desire for what it is. You still feel affection, but you no longer mistake it for eternity. You still grieve, but the grief no longer consumes. This is the second release, to suffer consciously. There is a strange grace in accepting the futility of the will. When you no longer demand that life obey your longing, life ceases to be your enemy. It becomes what it always was, movement without purpose, beauty without meaning. The heart grows quiet. The need to possess transforms into the ability to observe. At this point, solitude ceases to be punishment. It becomes revelation. You begin to sense that aloneness is not the absence of love, but the condition for seeing it truly. Only in solitude does love shed its disguises. Only in silence does the will lose its voice. The world calls solitude loneliness because it does not understand it. But loneliness is resistance, solitude is acceptance. Loneliness demands to be filled, solitude allows itself to be empty. And in that emptiness, there is space for truth. You start to see others not as extensions of your hunger, but as separate, sovereign beings, each driven by their own invisible storms. You no longer ask, how can they make me happy? You ask, how can I refrain from adding to their suffering? This is the birth of compassion, not sentimental pity, but clear-eyed recognition. Compassion arises only when the will is quiet enough to see beyond itself. To love without illusion is to love without ownership. It is to love the world as one loves a tragic melody, precisely because it cannot last. The storm of hatred passes. What remains is stillness. You do not forget the past, but it ceases to sting. The memories fade into soft images, a smile, a touch, a silence. They belong to time now, not to you. And in this stillness, you glimpse something that resembles peace, not the triumphant peace of victory, but the humble peace of surrender. The realization that nothing was ever truly yours to keep, not their love, not their presence, not even your own longing. Everything that comes must go. Everything that begins must end. And yet, within this law, there is no cruelty, only rhythm. Perhaps this is what wisdom feels like. Not joy, not despair, but a calm alignment with necessity. You no longer ask the world to be different. You no longer curse the will for being what it is. You simply watch the play unfold, knowing that every actor, yourself included, plays a role written by forces older than thought. This, then, is the final release. Not freedom from desire, but understanding of it. The will still beats, but its tyranny weakens. The heart still moves, but without illusion. The mind, once captive to its own projections, becomes a witness instead of a victim. The story of love and hate, when seen from this height, loses its drama. It becomes a pattern, tragic, beautiful, repetitive. Lovers will continue to meet, to promise, to betray, to weep. The cycle will continue long after you have ceased to care. But you, having seen, will not be deceived again. You will still feel, but you will not fall. You will still care, but you will not cling. You will still love, but your love will no longer turn to hate, for it will not expect eternity from what was never meant to last. And in that quiet renunciation lies the only peace this world can offer, the peace of seeing clearly, the peace of no longer demanding the impossible. When the noise finally stops, what remains is not silence, but the faint hum of existence itself. You sit among the ruins of what was once called love and realize that nothing has truly been lost, because nothing was ever yours to keep. The heart, once frantic, now beats with a strange steadiness, as though it has accepted its servitude to time. Every emotion that once felt infinite now reveals its boundary, and in that limitation there is peace. To see clearly is to die a little. The mind that sees through illusion cannot return to innocence. The sweetness of ignorance is gone forever, and yet you would not trade it back, for even the bitter truth has its own kind of purity. You begin to sense that what you mistook for tragedy was simply the natural rhythm of the will. It rises, reaches, and recedes. It was never betrayal, only motion. The will to live has always been the unseen puppeteer. It drove you toward love, toward union, toward ecstasy, not out of kindness, but out of necessity. Life must perpetuate itself, and it uses tenderness as its instrument. To understand this is to look upon nature with a new calm. You no longer curse it for its cruelty. You simply recognize that it never promised gentleness. The tiger's hunger and the lover's longing are the same impulse, differing only in costume. And yet, awareness changes everything. The will may continue its commands, but you no longer mistake them for divine instruction. You feel desire arise and pass as weather, not as fate. You witness joy and despair the way one watches sunlight flicker through clouds, transient, indifferent, endlessly recurring. You no longer demand permanence from what was born to fade. In this detachment, there is dignity. You begin to see beauty where once you saw loss. The fleeting smile, the brief warmth, the transient union all become precious precisely because they vanish. The tragedy was never that love ends, but that we believed it should not. Eternity was a childish wish projected upon time's trembling fabric. Once the wish dissolves, what remains is simple appreciation, the quiet gratitude of having felt at all. Love and hate, joy and sorrow, passion and exhaustion, all movements of the same imprisoned energy. To fight them is futile, to understand them is liberation. The sage does not destroy desire. He observes it exhaust itself. He does not flee attachment. He lets attachment burn until nothing remains but ash. Out of that ash rises neither despair nor delight, but stillness. In that stillness, the world reveals another face. The same eyes that once sought a savior now see the beauty of what simply is. The wind through the trees, the rain on a window, the sound of footsteps receding into dusk, each becomes enough. The need for dramatic meaning subsides. life, stripped of justification, becomes luminous in its futility. You realize that meaning was never hidden behind events. It was the quiet awareness watching them unfold. When the will loosens its grip, compassion emerges without effort. You no longer love because you need, you love because you see. Every creature, every stranger carries the same restless pulse, the same hunger to be whole. You no longer divide the world into those who gave or took from you. Everyone becomes a reflection of the same tragedy. To recognize this is to soften, not sentimentally, but lucidly. Forgiveness becomes unnecessary. There is nothing left to forgive when you understand that all harm was born of blindness. The beloved who wounded you, the self who erred both, were instruments of a will too ancient to be blamed. You no longer demand apologies from the past. You bow to it, as one bows to the ocean that both nourishes and drowns. This surrender is not defeat. It is the end of resistance. To surrender is to agree with reality. The mind ceases its quarrel with what has been. The body, once tense with wanting, begins to breathe again. You discover that peace is not given. It appears the moment you stop demanding it. There comes a day when you encounter the one you once loved, perhaps by chance. The eyes that once ignited storms now feel distant, almost gentle. You do not tremble, you do not ache. You simply recognize them, another traveler, another ghost of longing. The heart bows in silent acknowledgement. We both suffered under the same spell. Then you walk on, not in pride, not in regret, but in understanding. The circle has closed. In the solitude that follows, you do not feel emptiness. You feel space, vast, breathable space, where the will no longer dictates every motion. Thoughts arise like birds and vanish. Emotions come like tides and withdraw. Nothing stays, yet nothing is missing. This is not happiness, for happiness still depends on circumstance. This is serenity, the equilibrium that comes when nothing inside you pleads for more than what is. To live without illusion is to live without drama. The world becomes quiet, but not dead. Even sorrow retains a strange sweetness, because it, too, is finite. You find yourself smiling at the simplicity of it all. How much agony was built on misunderstanding. You chased permanence in a transient world and called the failure heartbreak. But transience was never failure, it was the law. The will continues to hum beneath consciousness, yet its tyranny has waned. It still urges, but you no longer obey blindly. You act, you love, you lose, but each event passes through you like wind through reeds. You participate without possession. You engage without clinging. The game continues, but you no longer mistake it for eternity. Perhaps this is the secret, Schopenhauer tried to whisper through his despair, that liberation does not arrive through conquest, but through comprehension. To renounce is not to reject life, but to stop demanding that it be other than it is. The sage's peace is not joy, it is the quiet cessation of craving. He looks upon pleasure and pain as travelers look upon weather, sometimes sun, sometimes rain, all temporary. You might think such detachment kills passion, but the opposite is true. Only when you cease to demand from love do you truly experience it. Freed from the hunger to possess, affection becomes pure perception. You see beauty without the impulse to cage it. You love without the terror of loss. You let people come and go as seasons do, grateful for the warmth they bring, unresentful of the cold they leave. This is not indifference. It is maturity of soul. The child clings to toys. The adult watches them fall apart and smiles. The spirit that has understood the will watches its own desires rise and fade and smiles the same way. For in every vanishing there is the proof that you are free to remain. When at last you sit alone, no lover, no enemy, no fever, you might feel an echo of the old ache. Do not resist it. That ache is life reminding you that you are still bound to its rhythm. Let it pass through you. Feel it without naming it. Watch it dissolve into the quiet from which it came. That quiet is not loneliness. It is the background of being, the eternal witness. And perhaps in that stillness, a new kind of love awakens not toward a person, but toward existence itself. A love without object, without fear, without hope. It does not say, I need you. It says, I see you. It does not cling. It simply beholds. It is the love of the lucid mind for the tragic beauty of the world, the love that neither turns into hate nor seeks reward, the love that understands. You begin to live differently. You no longer chase nor flee. You move through life like a traveler who knows the road is circular. Every encounter becomes sacred because it is brief. Every goodbye becomes natural because it was always implied. You do not curse the impermanent. You bow to it. For only what ends can ever be beautiful. The old words lose their weight. Forever becomes meaningless. Now becomes divine. You realize that all your former suffering came from confusing the two. You wanted the now to last forever, and forever never arrives. But now, this breath, this silence, this fleeting awareness is eternity condensed. To dwell in it is to be free, and so the circle closes. Love and hate, joy and despair, illusion and awakening all resolved into one quiet truth. Everything passes. To fight this is to suffer. To accept it is to live. The will may still whisper its demands, but you listen as one listens to the echo of a distant sea, a reminder of where you came from, not a command to return. You will still meet new faces. You will still feel warmth rise within you, perhaps even desire. But behind every pulse of feeling, you will hear the soft laughter of understanding. You will know what it is, what it was, what it will become. You will not resist it, but neither will you drown. You will walk beside it, calm, untricked, awake. And if, one evening, you find yourself looking back on all that has been the passions, the losses, the years spent chasing the mirage of completion, you may feel a quiet gratitude. Not for what was gained, but for what was seen. The truth, after all its cruelty, is kind in its own way. It frees you from the need to lie to yourself. The curtain falls, the music fades, the stage of the heart empties. Yet you remain the silent observer who has finally understood that love and hate were only gestures of the same restless tide. The will still moves, but it no longer drags you. You watch it shimmer and disappear into the distance, like the last ripple on a dark sea. And in that moment, neither happy nor sad, neither clinging nor rejecting, the strange peace of having nothing left to lose, because nothing was ever yours. The play of love and hate continues for others, but you, at last, have stepped out of it. You stand at the edge of the world, calm, lucid, alive. Perhaps this is what it means to be free, not to escape the world, but to see it as it is beautiful, tragic, and sufficient.